Good afternoon, and welcome to CNU Talks, live at lunch. I'm Baxter Vendrick, and I'm your moderator for today. This monthly series is brought to you by your Christopher Newport Alumni Society and the Office of Alumni Relations. And we are so thankful for the great interest and engagement from our Captains for Life throughout this series. So far this year, we've had President Kelly present, followed by Brandon Jones of Community Captains. And last month, we learned about the great things happening with the Center for Community Engagement, thanks to its director, Vanessa Buellman. And this month, I am honored to have my friend and our athletic director, Kyle McMullin. Kyle has served as Christopher Newport University's Director of Athletics since May of 2016. He has overseen the most successful era of CNU athletics in the history of the university. Kyle has been part of the Captain's Athletic Department in various capacities since arriving to Newport News in 2008. Kyle has led the Captains to some incredible achievements, both on the playing fields and in the classrooms, while developing significant upgrades in finance and facilities. CNU has produced 3 NCAA Division III national championships during his tenure: women's soccer in 2021, softball in 2022, and most recently, men's basketball in 2023. Kyle's also overseen the growth of the department's outstanding facilities, including the opening of Jennings Family Stadium in the fall of 2019, which is home of CNU's men's and women's lacrosse and field hockey. He's also been instrumental in the transformation of the CNU Golf Center and the Zada Training Center for baseball and softball, which is scheduled to open pretty soon. He is a native of Blacksburg, Virginia, a 2004 graduate of the University of Richmond with a degree in business administration, and earned his master's in sports administration from Ohio University in 2022. Early in his career at CNU, Kyle became assistant director of athletics for advancement and communications and took over daily oversight of the department's communications efforts, adding responsibility for all athletic publications and the official athletic sites, cnusports.com. And in the summer of 2011, he coordinated the release of a brand new identity for CNU athletics. And Kyle's also overseen CNU's trademark licensing program since its inception in April 2011. Prior to becoming a captain, McMullin spent 4 years with ISP Sports at the University of Cincinnati, followed by a year at Villanova. He will begin today with sharing some thoughts, and when you have questions, just please type them in the Q&A area. Once Kyle is ready for questions, I will read some of those as long as time allows. This session will be recorded and shared to our Captain for Life community to view at another time. And with that, I turn it over to Kyle.
Well, geez, thanks, Baxter. I assume that you probably coordinated with my mother for that introduction, so I appreciate all of the kind words. Hard to believe, though, that I've actually been at Christopher Newport now for 16 years. And as you were speaking back to some of the things that we talked to, or that we accomplished early on in my time here, it was a fun reminder of frankly how far we've come and what we've been able to do here as a department and as a university. So as we get rolling, let me just say thank you all. I genuinely appreciate the fact that one, you care enough that you want to tune in and hear what I have to say, but also that you care enough about athletics here at Christopher Newport, that you tune in to learn about what we're doing for our student athletes and for our community. It's not lost on me that, when I took over as AD in 2016, I was handed the responsibility of overseeing an athletic department that was wildly successful long before I got to be here. So all of those nice things that Baxter had to say about me, that's great. But they're not my doing. And I think what you'll find in the course of interacting with any of our staff or our coaches, we all have a very fine-tuned sense that we serve a larger mission, a larger purpose than just getting out there and trying to bring trophies home to Newport News. Do we like to do that? 100%. The dopamine rush is pretty real when you get to hold a national championship trophy and you get to see the student athletes, live that moment that they've been dreaming of quite literally their entire lives. But we all know that it doesn't happen without having an entire community of support around us. And so, you'll hear me talk, and you'll hear some of our other folks talk too about our community of champions. It's something that we just kind of colloquially talk about within our department, about how it's our way to recognize the fact that, while coaches certainly play an outsized role in putting our student athletes on the platform to succeed, so do the athletic trainers, so do the sports information folks, so do athletic equipment and strength and conditioning and facilities. Not every layer of the organization really has to be focused on making sure that we're going to lift our students up and give them that moment to shine. So today, here's my thoughts, and I'm certainly looking forward to taking a bunch of questions. I plan on spending most of my time answering questions. I could probably sit here and talk for days about any number of things when it comes to college athletics, but at that point, it would probably be just a lot of people snoozing on the other side of the computer, and I'm not interested in that. But I wanted to give you a quick update on where we stand with all things athletics related here on campus. I want to talk with you a little bit as we're looking forward here for the summer and the fall, what we're anticipating. And then I wanted to talk with you a little bit about where we are with college athletics as a whole in this country and frankly as a society. Things that nobody ever told me when I took the job 8 years ago is how much of my time would be spent worrying about Christopher Newport's role in the landscape of college athletics and how we fit into that. That's becoming a massive part of what we will all have to address, not just as professionals in the business, but as people that care about the value that college athletics brings to our student athletes and to our society. That's something that we are eyeball deep in unraveling right now. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll do some questions. Baxter, does that sound like a good plan to you?
That sounds fantastic, Kyle. Fantastic.
And let's get after it. All right. So first and foremost, competitive update. I'm assuming most of you all have been paying attention and been able to stay tuned through CNUsports.com and other avenues. But the fall was another wildly successful season for our student athletes here. In the fall, football, field hockey, volleyball, men's soccer, women's soccer, all 5 of those team sports made their NCAA tournaments and won games. Football got eliminated in the first round, but they played a battle of a game against Randolph-Macon, and I'm super excited about the future of that program. Coach Crowley, his staff, and his students are really doing a terrific job, and this fall is going to be a fun one. Cross country also had athletes represented at the national meet as well. So all of the sports that have a championship season in the fall were represented in their NCAA championships. And then again this winter, men's basketball, women's basketball followed up their historic seasons last year with extraordinary years again. Both of them finished, men's basketball finished top 10, women's basketball finished top 15 in the country. They both made the NCAA tournament. I was extraordinarily proud of the men's team. In Greensboro in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. I've watched 16 years worth of captain's basketball, and I've seen some really good teams. I'm not sure I've been more proud of a team as I was leaving Greensboro after they were defeated in the Elite 8. That group of young men played so passionately, played so focused on being able to support each other in what was 2 of the most physical games I've ever seen captain's basketball team play in. And that group battled and just represented this place so well that I was super proud leaving there. So again, you've got those 2 in the NCAA tournament. Indoor track and field had athletes represented at their national championships as well. So to date, every NCAA championship we've had a chance to be able to participate in as an institution, we've done it. And that's pretty remarkable. In the fall, it was us and Johns Hopkins that had all of those teams qualify for the NCAA tournament. Folks, that's great company to keep. Johns Hopkins is the best comprehensive athletics program in all of Division III athletics. In fact, I was chatting with their athletic director on Monday, and we were both very much enjoying the fact that we've got that level of competition 4 hours from each other, and how much we appreciate the fact that all of our teams try to compete against each other and make sure that they get to test themselves against the gold standard. You know, we want our athletes to be able to go to Johns Hopkins and have their athletes come here and compete at that level. So the one thing that we didn't talk about yet was our cheer team. So cheer went down to Daytona Beach 2 weeks ago and came home with their first ever NCAA championship. About 4 or 5 years ago, the cheer world went through a rather large reorganization, and there used to be 2 competing entities in the cheer world that hosted national championships. Well, those 2 have now combined into one, and there's just one national championship event annually. And this was our first time going down and competing in that unified event. And our young ladies dominated. They had quite literally a flawless performance. They had 0 deductions on both courses, on both performances that they did, and were just remarkable. So Coach Erica Flanagan, who is a captain for life, who graduated from here, you know, back in the early 2000s, she's been leading that program since, and it is entirely her credit, the level that group competes on, and frankly, I expect we're probably going to be right back there at probably doing it again this time next year. So it's been a great year to date, but we're getting to the point in the spring here where all of our spring sports are reaching championship season as well. If you just go down the list, you know, baseball top 15 in the country, softball top 10, men's lacrosse is top 10, women's lacrosse is top 20, women's tennis is top 20, men's tennis is top 30. Everybody across the board this spring is having terrific seasons. Men's and women's golf currently are competing as independent, and their seasons have come to an end. Unfortunately, I think they might be on the outside looking in when it comes to NCAA tournament selections next week, but they did have strong seasons. And we've got young groups with both of them, so I'm excited about what things will look like come the fall when they get back after it. But we're going to be in the position again here where we're going to have 4 or 5, maybe even 6 teams that I expect this spring to be able to be pushing deep into NCAA competition and competing for championships again. So I think the message for all of you is I want to make sure you know that that this group cares about across the board success, and our coaches and student athletes are extremely competitive in that regard. They look throughout our department and they see teams succeeding at the highest level, and it pushes them all to be able to do that and be successful as well. So with that, that's kind of where we are right now. I'm happy to take questions on any of the seasons, any of the teams here as we get into the Q&A portion. But I did want to talk a little bit about kind of as we reach this point in the academic year, one of the challenges that we always have is finishing the year with the same level of enthusiasm that we started the year. Come August, when our student athletes check in, you know, everybody's ready to roll and everybody's ready to go. But this is one of the areas at the university where our department goes full steam ahead from August until the last team competes in the end of May, beginning of June. And, you know, that even means, you know, we keep student athletes, they'll get maybe a quick Thanksgiving break for basketball, but they're back here competing in games shortly thereafter. They normally will get 4 or 5 days around Christmas to be able to go be with their families, but then they'll be back here and we'll be hosting events throughout the Christmas and New Year's holiday. And so our folks get to this point of the year and they're all a little gassed. And so our staff is very much focused on making sure that, all right, let's put all of our focus and energy in reaching the finish line and making sure that all of the kids that have put all of their effort and energy into getting ready for this moment have the full support of our group as well, and that we're there and present, ready to go for them. Because track and field, men's and women's tennis, men's and women's lacrosse all have their conference championships starting next week. So they're all in finals this week, and then they come immediately out of finals and have to flip that switch and get ready to go compete for trophies and championships. And they'll be ready. They'll be ready. We're going to host men's and women's lacrosse on Wednesday here in conference semifinals. And so if you're in the area, come by on Wednesday afternoon to Jennings Family Stadium. The men and women will play a doubleheader out there, and the winners will advance to the conference championships over the next weekend. But they'll be ready to roll. Baseball and softball happen about a week after the lacrosses do, so they will be playing in their conference championships on commencement weekend. And this is something that we've encountered over the years. Just the way the commencement works, the NCAA championships for lacrosse and tennis happen on commencement weekend every single year for us. So one of the cool things that I'm not sure any of you maybe know is that we actually host a commencement ceremony every year for our graduating senior student athletes that are going to have to miss the big ceremony because they're going to be representing this institution competing. So we get the president, provost, Baxter, everybody that has a formal role, the registrar, all of us get together on the Wednesday before commencement, and we do a real actual commencement ceremony where we confer degrees upon our graduating senior student athletes so that they can do that with their families, they can have that moment to be able to celebrate their accomplishment, and then from there we can cut them loose so that they can be focused on trying to compete for championships without worrying about missing commencement or having to be in two places at once. It's a really cool ceremony. It's frankly one of my favorite things we do every year. It's one of those ones where you're welcome if you want to be at the Peebles Theater on Wednesday at I think it's 2 o'clock. We do it in there. It's a sight to be seen, and it's something super cool that this place does because of how much it cares about its student athletes and making sure that we treat them appropriately. This year was a big year for the Department of Athletics on the fundraising side. I'm guessing it probably comes as no surprise to any of you who live in the world that we all occupy. Things have gotten a lot more expensive recently. I will share with you, in a pre-COVID world, we used to rent a bus and take a soccer team to Mary Washington, for example, a 2-hour trip up to Fredericksburg, play a game, and take a 2-hour trip back. In a pre-COVID world, that would cost us about $800 to be able to rent a bus to do that. It costs us more than $3,000 now to be able to put a team on a bus and send them to Fredericksburg for the day and bring them home. So transportation costs have just ballooned on us. And it's not the only one. As we all know, inflationary pressures impact all areas of our business. So we've been very intentional about raising funds this year. I'm sure a good many of you have responded to those calls, and for those of you that have, I thank you so very much. But we're going to raise more than $1.2 million this year directly in support of the athletics here at Christopher Newport. Of that $1.2 million, over 800,000 of it has already come through the door, earmarked and restricted for use by our sport team, some of our programs. And so, we've been very intentional for years here about making sure that folks have the opportunity to support women's tennis. Or if they want to support baseball, they can do that. There are some places that have made the decision that athletic giving is going to largely just be given to a large nebulous account. But we've always believed that if people powerfully believe in the experience that they're having with sailing, by God, let's let them support sailing. And so we've been just blown away at the level of support that we've received this year. And $1.2 million is incredible, but we're using it. That's not money that's going and sitting in a rainy day account. That's money that's being used by our coaches and by our staff to make sure that we're investing it in the experience that our students are having on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that we can live up to the promise we've made to them that when they come here, we're going to give them a first-class experience. So as we look forward to next academic year, we're going to be back in the cycle of needing to raise a lot of money again. I'm guessing we're going to need to raise every bit of 1.2 million or more to be able to continue to keep pace. The honest fact of the matter is our competitive cohort now, when we're talking about putting our coaches and athletes in a position to succeed, means we spend a lot more time with folks like Johns Hopkins than we do with with some of the other schools that we used to compete with 15 years ago. It's harder to make those incremental changes to continue to make progress when the progress you're making is against places like Hopkins and NYU and Washington University and Emory and those folks. It's a great company to keep, but it's one that we're going to have to be furiously competitive to make sure that we stay a part of. So that'll be a big part that you continue to hear from us here moving forward. Is it's going to take a village. It's going to take that community of champions to make sure that we're pushing forward. All right, and then looking forward to the fall super quick. We have published the football schedule for the fall. We were a little behind schedule this year on getting that one out to the world because we're trying to iron out some start times with some folks, but we finally got that taken care of. And it's going to be an awesome fall in Town Bank Stadium. I want to make sure that you all are able to join us. On the home opener this year is going to be September 14th against our good friends up at Johns Hopkins. And Hopkins is a perennial top 20 team in the country. So that's going to be a great football game, and it's going to be a great measuring stick game for us right out of the gate to see exactly where this team is going to be. And then homecoming weekend is going to be, the October 19th weekend when we play Rowan. So we'll look forward to seeing all of y'all back on campus for that. All right, last thing I just wanted to touch on, and I won't be surprised if we get some questions on this front as well. But we talked exclusively about CNU so far at this point. And I mentioned that a giant part of my role is helping make sure that we position this university and our athletic department to be successful within the landscape of college athletics, right? And so what I mean by that is managing conference affiliation, managing how the university provides feedback and input and works with the folks in Indianapolis on what the future of Division III looks like, what the future of college athletics looks like. All of those things are sucking a lot of oxygen out of the room these days, and necessarily so. They're cornerstones of how you can kind of support your student athletes. For those of you that are familiar with how we go about athletics here, I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that the vast majority of our sports compete in the Coast to Coast Athletic Conference, and it is exactly that, a conference that stretches from Salisbury, Maryland on the Eastern Shore, all the way to the University of California in Santa Cruz. So quite literally, you can stare at the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean in our conference, and it's pretty cool. But we've had to do that very creatively because a lot of the more traditional conferences within Division III aren't available to us. As the landscape has changed over the years, Division III conferences that have evolved so that they're trying to partner, schools are trying to build conferences based off of institutional identity. Has less to do with competitive success or whether or not you're committed to competitive success. Has more to do with the fact, are you a small private faith-based school, or are you a large public regional, or are you an elite academic liberal arts institution? There's a couple conferences in New England that are constituted around schools that fit that profile. And what we found is CNU is rather kind of geographically isolated. It's us, Mary Washington, and Salisbury as the three regional and public universities within the mid-Atlantic part of the United States. And all the schools around us that fit into the traditional conferences don't look like us and aren't comfortable with us being in their conference. So we had to go out and get creative, and we did. We went out and we recruited institutions that were in a position that they needed to have the conference support like we did, and we built the Coast to Coast Athletic Conference. 5 years ago when I began this enterprise, I'm not sure I would have forecasted how it was going to shake out, but I'll be frank, it's really benefited our teams. There's no doubt in my mind that part of the reason we've had 3 national championships in the last 3 or 4 years has directly to do with the fact that as we put schedules together in the Coast to Coast Athletic Conference, by the time our student athletes get to the NCAA tournament, they've been tested harder than anybody else in the country. We get to choose the teams we get to play from top to bottom, and we can be very intentional about creating opportunities that prepare them for success in the NCAA tournament in ways that traditional conferences might not be able to do. So that's been a cool part of it. It's been a lot of fun, but it's also, as we are looking at the college athletics landscape in general, I find myself having to answer a lot more questions about how this works and how it makes sense for college athletics and how it makes sense for our athletes in light of a lot of the legal pressures that now we're facing in the world of college athletics. So it doesn't, I'm sure all of you, you spend any amount of time interacting with media that covers sports, and you'll hear about the various lawsuits that the NCAA is embroiled in right now, and the various discussions that are happening on Capitol Hill about whether or not antitrust legislation should be passed to protect the model of college athletics. or whether the National Labor Relations Board is going to, across the board, wave a magic wand and declare that all student athletes are now employees of their university. All of these things are possible within the spectrum of outcomes here for us. But it's been eye-opening for me as somebody who has spent my entire life in and around college campus and been involved with college athletics, to see how much divergence there has just truly become in the marketplace that we call college athletics. I mean, I'll be very frank and candid. It is hard for me to sit here with you all and say that a football athlete at Ohio State is a student first and an athlete second. I'm not there every day, and so I'm not going to, if I get subpoenaed, I'll answer honestly. I don't know what they go through, but considering the volume of revenue, the amount of eyeballs that are on them, and the commitment that those institutions require from their students, it'd be hard for me not to see how they could be classified as employees. But I think the biggest challenge we as a society have, and I don't think this is just us as professionals in the space, I think this is us collectively as a society, is figuring out where we're going to draw that line, right? If there is a corner or a part of college athletics enterprise that should generally classify students as athletes, I find it really hard to believe that all athletes should be classified as employees. And it's going to be a hard sell for me. I had the good fortune to work up close and personal with Power 5 athletic programs, and I work very closely with small private Division III schools. What happens at Christopher Newport and what we expect of our student athletes and the way that we approach the philosophical implementation of athletics is just different, right? And so as a society, I'm sensitive to, and the conversations that I try to have, whether it be with lawmakers, whether it be with other folks in the profession, is making sure that we're all sensitive to the fact that we try not to paint with too broad of a brush. There is nuance within this discussion that we have to be aware of, to make sure that we don't end up one day in a situation where a judge or a bill passes through Congress that just generically says they're all employees. That will fundamentally change the entire enterprise to the point where I think the vast majority of institutions would struggle to see how they can exist in that model. And so we've just got to be very aware as a society that, there's probably an area where the model needs to be transformed and in a very dramatic way. But for a broad scope of the people that we currently refer to as student athletes and that currently benefit immensely from the experience of intercollegiate athletics, us not being sensitive to how we go about that process could cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm and a lot of lost opportunity as well. So I have now rambled for the better part of 30 minutes, and I apologize for that. I will, I guess at this point, Baxter, is it fair to open it up to questions?
Yes, and I have several. So hopefully we have time for all of the ones that have come in. But you were most recently talking about conferences, and you answered some of the stuff with coast to coast. So I'm not neglecting those who asked those questions, but you covered it. But one did ask, is there any thought of other sports joining the New Jersey Athletic Conference like football or merging with a different one?
Yep. So I have those conversations on a near daily basis. Here's what I would tell you is geography is not our friend as an institution in Division III. If you look at the scatter plot of Division III members, it is predominantly heavy in the Northeast and the upper Midwest, and it kind of follows around the Great Lakes there. We're on the southern tier of the Division III footprint. Now, I'm very creative with trying to make compelling arguments to be able to help our student athletes, especially the ones that don't benefit from an AQ right now, and trying to find conferences that'll give them a home. What I find, and this is not just an NJAC thing, but this is with a lot of the other conferences I've had discussions with over the years. Most of the conferences in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast can't wrap their head around having a conference member that requires their kids to spend the night in a hotel. That is a very common theme within Division III. If you think about the New Jersey Athletic Conference, and we'll use them just as an example because I got a lot of dear friends up there and we work very, very closely with them. But their southernmost member in that conference is Stockton University over in Atlantic City, and their northernmost is Ramapo. Ramapo is just north of New York City. Their entire conference literally fits within the state of New Jersey. And you should hear them complain and argue over driving the Garden State Parkway to get from Atlantic City up to Ramapo, and how the massive inconvenience that is, and how that exercise needs to be so well thought out and scheduled appropriately within the context of their greater season because of the burden it places on their students. It makes me chuckle, and I have to not take it personally because, I mean, that's a day that ends in Y for our student athletes, right? I mean, we ask a lot of our student athletes. But you know, I mean, we've got schools within 2 hours of Newport News that won't play us because they don't believe it's in their student athletes' best interest to play a team as competitive as we are. I can't force them to do that, but because our competitive profile has risen to the point where we are, you know, nationally respected, we have to get hyper creative with how we play, and those conferences up there just don't, you know. And so I've tried to instill as much creativity in that group as I can, but and I'm going to continue to do it. You know, not a week goes by that I'm not on the phone with a conference commissioner somewhere trying to figure out creative solutions for those little pockets of sports we have that still need it.
All right, thank you. We've got a couple sort of game specific questions,
Yep.
and I'm going to lead with the one that, Kyle, I hear every time the football schedule is released. When are we going to have a night homecoming football game again?
I should probably look in the NJAC bylaws so that I can quite literally quote it chapter and verse. The operating bylaws of the New Jersey Athletic Conference do not permit an institution to play a football game after 1 p.m. unless it is mutually agreed upon by both institutions. So this is one of those areas where Division III is very different than Division I and Division II. Years ago, when television got involved in broadcasting Division I football games, conferences realized that they no longer had the ability to control the start times. They had to be responsive to the television networks that said, yeah, well, you know, Alabama's playing at noon, so Texas, you have to play at 3. Like that, we're the ones that make the schedule, not you guys. That dynamic doesn't exist in Division III, and so every conference has a little different philosophical approach to how they go about it. But this is one where every year we have homecoming, and every year I have the conversation with the president's office trying to figure out, all right, is there an opponent that might be willing to, you know, to be friendly with us and play a night game? We've even offered to put schools up and pay for a night of hotels to get a night game out of it. But I can't compel them to do that, and that's what the challenge has been over the years, is that the way the rules are written, I can't force anybody into playing a night game. We have to try to convince them to be the best friends they can possibly be for it.
Thank you for that, Kyle. Specifically for any alums who are among those that ask me on a regular basis, you have heard unprompted the same response. Well, actually, a much more generic one, but nonetheless. So speaking of games as well, there's an alum who's like, I'm not local to Newport News. Are there any plans to increase the number of home games that are streamed, specifically with broadcasters and commentary?
So we are always looking to put commentary on every broadcast we can. We do in a given year a little more than 200 live broadcasts over the course of the year, and we don't have enough full-time professional staff to be able to put one of them on every single one of them. And what we've also found too is a great developmental opportunity for our students. So our sports information staff does an incredible job of making all of those events happen and all of those broadcasts happen, but we're also actively training and recruiting students that want to try to pursue a career in sports broadcasting, and using that as an opportunity to coach, mentor, and develop and give them opportunities to develop reels. We've been very fortunate over the last about 8 years or so. We've had about 8 or 9 of our students that have gone off to work professionally in the space based on the experience that we've been able to give them. But that when we don't have a live broadcast, or when we don't have live commentary on an event, because we don't have a body that has the experience to be able to do it, and that we couldn't staff it that way. So that's one that they're always focused on. Every chance that we have to put somebody on, they're going to put somebody on. And the only reason that we wouldn't have them is if we don't have somebody that's got the band. We don't have enough human bodies to make it happen. There's, frankly, one of the other challenges that we have, I think it was a couple weekends ago, we had 6 different events that we were broadcasting, either concurrently or back to back. So they're managing an incredible volume on a daily basis, much less the annual basis. And I give them a ton of credit for it, but it is something we're trying to constantly recruit enough bodies to make sure we can do.
Fantastic. You mentioned, or Baxter mentioned in the intro, a golf center and Zada. Can you talk a little bit about those two things?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. This year, this academic year, we've brought online one of those two. Golf Center is a project that frankly came to us in a rather opportunistic way. The university acquired the old Peninsula Fine Arts Center several years ago, and it has been it sat vacant for over 2 years. It sits within the footprint of the Mariners Museum in their park. So it is, access to that facility is restricted because of access to the park, which made it almost impossible for the real estate foundation to figure out what to do with it. Well, our golf folks only get limited access to be on the course at James River Country Club. And even over there, their driving range is insufficient to be able to let college golfers train. So we've been trying to find creative solutions. Well, I walk into the Peninsula Fine Arts Center with a flashlight when I found out that nobody had figured out what to do with it. And they've got a big giant gallery that's 62 feet long by 20 feet wide with 16-foot tall ceilings. They got another gallery that's 22 by 30 with 16-foot ceilings. And our golf coaches and I started to scheme and get a little creative and think, you know what, we can take a portion of this building and turn it into an indoor golf facility without a tremendous amount of resources. We don't have to put any walls up. We don't have to take any walls down. We don't have to do any actual structural work to it. We just have to be able to create the hitting bays and then the putting area. And so that's what we did. We created 4 indoor hitting bays with simulators that our men's team and our women's team use. Frankly, most of the time they're just using the driving range functions on those because it spits out incredible data that they can use to help train, anything from hitting wedge shots all the way to hitting drivers. And then we took that other gallery and we put an indoor putting green in. And then, we've decorated the place a little bit to make it a little sporty. But it's a really, really cool space, and it is super unique. There is not another Division III school in America that has that, I can assure you. And our student athletes have been able to get in there this year and really use it to work on their games and get better. So I'm excited about that one. It is entirely privately funded. We've had donors that have stepped forward to be able to help us buy the materials and buy the technology that we need to make that a truly transformative space for our kids. And so it's been really cool. So if you're ever in Newport News, you want to come see it, let me know. We're happy to show it off to you. It's a pretty cool spot. The Zada Center is an indoor hitting facility that sits within the baseball field footprint, but it's directly across the street from softball as well. So they're going to use it. And it is a 60 by 90 indoor building. It does not have columns or cupolas or bricks on it. So don't let anybody be shocked when you show up and you see it for the first time. But it's an indoor batting cage, right? Newport News, we're lucky in the fact we don't get a lot of snow, but man, trying to practice in January and February when it's 42 degrees outside and drizzling rain makes it really hard on our athletes. And so for years, we've been trying to figure out ways to be able to make sure that we could have an indoor facility where they can continue to train and work and be productive when the weather doesn't permit them to do that. That's exactly what the Zada Center is going to be. Vic Zada was a longtime businessman on the peninsula, and actually was brought here in the early 50s by the Brooklyn Dodgers organization when they had a minor league franchise down in Hampton at the War Memorial Stadium. So Vic came to be the general manager of the Baby Dodgers, and then later transitioned into running restaurants and hotels. And so his family came to us as friends of the university, dear friends of the place, as a way to honor their father and his commitment to not just this community, but to the baseball community as well. So they gave us what we needed to get this thing rolling and make it happen. And we are just about there with getting the permitting out of Richmond taken care of so that we can actually start using the dang thing. As is always the case, permitting out of Richmond is always an adventure, but by golly, we're going to get it there.
President Kelly is a D3 or was a D3 athlete. How is he as president involved with the athletic program?
Well, right before I began this, I was over in his office talking with him about some sailing projects that we want to get started on. He's been great. President Kelly understands the impact of the collegiate athlete experience in a very personal way. So in addition to him being a collegiate athlete, his son was an athlete as well at a Division III school. And his wife, Angie, grew up as the daughter of a small college athletic director, and she's been around college athletics her whole life. So, you know, I think one of the things that we don't do well enough in the world of college athletics is tell the stories of personal transformation and how powerful it is for the students and the people that are invested in that experience, right? Like, we ask a lot of our kids. We push them, we challenge them. We oftentimes push them and challenge them in ways that are uncomfortable and they didn't even realize that they could grow in. That's what coaching is, right? And so President Kelly gets that, and he gets the fact that it's important for us as an institution to continue to do this well. And he recognizes the fact that some of the very best kids that we have on this campus come here because we have this powerful combination of a wonderful academic experience, a wonderful campus community experience, and this commitment to athletics. You know, in the world of Division III, if you do all three of those things well, you can attract some remarkable human beings to your campus, and that's what we've been able to do. So he and I talk on a daily basis, and we, you know, I'm over in his office probably more than a lot of athletic directors are in their president's office. But it's all about making sure that he's informed and he wants to be supportive. He wants to be there with our athletes. Senior days mean a lot to him. You know, I think going through that experience with their son, I think it struck him how powerful that day is for parents too. And so whenever he can be at a senior day, he and Angie show up so that they can shake the parents' hands, they can say thank you, they can give them hugs and let them know how much they appreciate the fact that they brought their son or their daughter to this place so that they can give them the chance to be pushed and challenged to be championship caliber athletes. So he's great. I love it. Fantastic to have him here.
I'll make sure to send the recording of this to the president. A staffing question came up. How does our athletic staffing levels compare to other D3 schools?
Great question. You know, it depends on where you look within the world of Division III. So what I would tell you is we can probably divide the world of Division III athletics into three categories. The first is public schools. All right. There's 430 Division III institutions out there, and only 80 of them are public schools. So you've got 80% of the membership that are private schools. All right. Now, of the remaining, 350 schools of the D3 membership that are private, probably approximately 50 of those are super elite academic private schools. Think MIT, think Williams, think Bowdoin, NYU, Emory, on down the line, places with multi-billion-dollar endowments, international reputation. So it really leaves about 300 small private schools that are what we call enrollment-driven institutions. And these are places where, you know, the football coach has to recruit X, the basketball coach has to recruit Y, the baseball coach Z, and on down the line. And the sum total of all of those numbers, you know, equate to a large portion of the freshman class at the institution each year. Christopher Newport's staffing and how we have always approached athletics since long before I got here was that we were going to build this model in a way in which we provided athletics and each team and each staff in a way that maximized the experience for our students, almost in a Division I model. So when you compare us to Division III, what we look like is a lot like the MITs, the Emorys, the WashUs, the Johns Hopkins of the world, because those places have the resources to staff their athletics department exceedingly well and make sure that they have full-time professionals that are there to pour their heart and soul and their energy into the students. Some of those smaller enrollment-driven schools, we look very different at. You know, a lot of those places, if you have a full-time coach, they're, you know, a part-time coach and they're a part-time administrator, or they're a part-time coach and they're a part-time admissions employee. Those institutions, we do have a very different staffing model and frankly, just very different philosophy. But we've always approached, long before I got here, trying to staff athletics in a way that makes sure that we are going to align ourselves with the highest competitive level, because that's going to result in us having the best people here to focus on the experience that our students are having.
And we are going to close out with one final question here, and that is, what is the most exciting opportunity ahead for CNU athletics?
Ooh, good grief. I feel like I'm in an interview now. You know, over 16 years here, I've had the great fortune to kind of witness the evolution of our university and our athletic department, how we fit into it. I think the most exciting opportunity for this place is, over the last 25 years as an institution, we have grown into who we are today and embraced the role that athletics can play in that. We're at a pivotal moment in the history and the evolution of college athletics writ large, right? Whether it is a judge in California or the National Labor Relations Board or Congress, I think it's safe to assume all of us can recognize that college athletics 5 years from now is probably going to look very, very different than college athletics today does. I'm not sure 25 years ago this university was positioned to be able to play a role in helping shape what the future looks like. I think we do now. It's something that I'm excited about. When I go to meetings, when I go to conferences, when I go to national championship events, Christopher Newport is recognized now in a way for competitive excellence, for professionalism, for being a thought leader in the space in certain areas as well, that we never were before. And so for me, the most exciting opportunity for this place is, I see every day, I'm looking out the window of my office right now into the Freeman Center, and we've got two of our women's basketball athletes that are in there doing individual workouts right now because they care about their craft. We have the opportunity to put these kids in a spot where they're going to be able to grow, develop, be exceptional competitors, exceptional human beings. And because we've made that commitment as an institution, now I think it's going to give us the window and the opportunity to at least have a voice in charting what the future of this enterprise looks like. I don't want to lose what's happening out there right now because we didn't have the chance to be able to speak our voice and make sure people know the value that is not driven by eyeballs and television exposure and corporate sponsorships, right? That's the perception of what college athletics at large does. It's not what we do. What we do is what's happening out there right now with two kids that are out there just focused intently on being better versions of themselves. And We've got a chance to make sure that we can reshape things so that it's better for them. And that excites me because I know that at the end of the day, this is a community of champions, not just our athletes and coaches, but our alums, our family, our friends that understand how powerful this experience is, and they're going to protect what happens on this campus and support it. But what we do here is a really cool model and a really cool way to be able to show the rest of the country what can be done too. And we've got the obligation to do that. So that's what I'm going to spend a lot of time doing, is building a coalition of folks that can help us tell that story and help make sure that as college athletics continues to spin and it continues to evolve, that CNU and how we've chosen to commit to our athletes in this experience is recognized and appreciated, and has is able to carve out a little bit of what that future looks like.
Kyle, thank you so very much. And that I'm glad that was the last question, because I think being a captain is all about leadership, and that is represented both in our students, our student athletes, as well as our incredible director of athletics, Kyle McMullin. I know he's like, oh, stop, please don't. But
You need to stop talking to my mother, okay?
Okay, I will. I'll text her back and say we can't talk anymore. But I thank you all for being a part of today's conversation, the great questions, and we will be coming back again next month on the 28th of May, where we have the executive director of the Mary Torgler Fine Arts Center, Holly Coons, who will be telling us all about the wonderful things that are happening in this incredible treasure that we have here at Christopher Newport. We'll be sending out this video to everybody within the Captain for Life community, and please be on the lookout for the invitation for next month's Live at Lunch. And until then, we'll be seeing you soon. Have a great afternoon.